Premier Scott Moe spent the week with his counterparts in Ontario talking trade, and coming out of the meeting, his tone seemed to soften when it comes to the federal government. I had to take a second look at some of those quotes when I saw them. We've reconvened our political panel here to take a closer look at that. Jeremy Symes is a provincial politics reporter with the Canadian Press, and Murray Mandryk is a veteran political columnist. Good morning.
Good morning.
Veteran, like both wars.
So, Murray, let's start with you. Is this the beginning of a beautiful friendship? What did you make of Premier Moe's change in tone toward Mark Carney and the Liberals coming out of this week?
It is interesting. I don't know if it's going to be a beautiful friendship. Moe defined himself by his relationship with Trudeau,
Right.
and just watch me quote first thing he said after he was elected as Sask party leader. This is an opportunity with Mark Carney to redefine that relationship. Politically, you have to wonder why he wants to do that, because obviously the Sask party and the federal Conservatives, to which Moe was still aligned, are never going to be terribly friendly with the Liberals. But I think he sort of sees this as a couple opportunities, politically speaking and otherwise. If it doesn't work out, he can always go back and say, look, I tried, and everything else. But there is a sense right now in this country right now, because of the threat in the U.S. and Donald Trump, that he has to play along at least a little and create a bit of a unity thing going on. I think he should do more in that regard. And I think he should use this opportunity with these deals with provinces like Manitoba and PEI, not exactly something that's going to be the salvation of the Saskatchewan economy, is a deal with PEI, but nevertheless, it's something that we should have. And I think he should basically use this opportunity to waylay the threat of Western separation, say this is why the country does work. This is we can get together and talk about deals. We can actually get together with another prime minister, even a Liberal one, that isn't named Trudeau, and actually make some progress in that regard. I'm sure that Scott Moe is probably at the point in his career where he's thinking about wanting to get these things done, legacies, the need to get pipelines done. I don't think necessarily they're going to get done anyway because of the cost and the relative cost effectiveness of moving pipelines, but nevertheless, there are political elements in terms of what he's doing. It's generally a good thing. I think generally he could be doing more on the national unity front, but certainly better than maybe we've saw in the last 7 years in terms of this horrible relationship we had.
All right. And so, Jeremy, outside of those relationship goals, and we've heard a couple of them here, what are those key agenda items in that meeting that could affect us here?
Yeah, for sure. We definitely saw more handshake agreements and commitments, especially when it came around reducing interprovincial trade barriers. With trade uncertainty with the United States, more provinces are realizing economic gains can be had by doing this. You can add tens of billions of dollars to Canada's economy by reducing these internal trade barriers. And it's also something that the provinces feel like they can control, right? Something they can do. So broadly, the provinces agreed to introducing legislation to reduce these barriers, removing exceptions under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, expanding direct-to-consumer alcohol sales. This is something Saskatchewan liquor producers really want to get their products to other provinces, and making it easier for people to work from one province to another, that kind of labor mobility piece. But the specifics with Saskatchewan, we saw an MOU signed between the province, Ontario, and Alberta to create this framework to explore pipelines and rail corridors, expanding critical mineral processing hubs, get that moving. We also saw an MOU with Manitoba and Premier Canoe with Premier Scott Moe about strengthening trade through the Port of Churchill in northern Manitoba. This is an idea to connect farmers, industry, and exporters together, get more products out there, but also securing more federal funding for that port to maybe bring it up to like other ports like Vancouver, where Port of Churchill, it's not as big. It doesn't operate year round. Can we get more federal dollars to build that up? Maybe get a pipeline there eventually as well. So there are those agreements to kind of start that work, set those frameworks out. The provinces are still talking about becoming an energy superpower, expanding the markets, moving away from the U.S. more. And if it all kind of comes together, then you'd probably see Saskatchewan's products exports increase and improve our economy that way.
Yeah, and let's stick with if it all comes together. Murray, you touched on this a bit. Do you think any of this will lead to those big infrastructure projects or new pipelines?
Jeremy outlined the real problem in terms of the cost. The practicality of having the Port of Churchill is sort of a year-round port where you can move oil and things. Even northern BC isn't as good a location to move stuff as southern Vancouver ports, where you actually have infrastructure and have other things going on. So it isn't just the cost of building pipelines and everything else over Muskeg and everything else in the north that's new. It's all these other things. So there's a reality here. There's also the reality of the threat of Donald Trump's terrorists. I don't know how long this is going to go on, but by the time they ever get around to making a decision in this world, we might not see Donald Trump in this world, or we might not see a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, and we've been talking about provincial federal cooperation off the top there. Saskatchewan asking the feds for help now with the forest fire effort. So, Jeremy, what do we know about that?
Yeah, for sure. So Public Safety Minister Tim McLeod, he sent a letter to Ottawa this week asking for 300 crew members from the military to mop up some of these fires, get some helicopters in for bucketing, and to move crews around. The province also needs water haulers and sprinklers to protect communities. Federal government responded quite quickly to this. They say these 300 crew members from the military are planning to start work by Saturday. But it's been quite a big political issue in the province. We had the opposition NDP come out quite early back in June saying, the government under Scott Moe's Sask party should have called in the military much sooner. You have to remember we also had those water bombers down due to maintenance issues as well. So a lot of issues that the NDP has been pointing out that the government should have acted on. Jordan McPhail, he's the critic for Northern Affairs, said this week, again, asking why it took so long. You look at places like Denera Beach, lots of homes there burned down. You look at East Trout Lake, also pretty wiped out. So it's a big issue for those communities as well. There's a lot of people that have had these questions. So Marlo Pritchard, he's the head of the SPSA. Reporters did get to ask him about that this week, and he defended again the decision to not bring in the military sooner. He said it really came down to the fires themselves and the training that these military personnel have. So back in June, the fires were raging. They were quite intense, and military firefighters don't have that same type of training as Type 1s or Type 2s. Right. And so it was unsafe to put them in those situations. Now what Pritchard is saying, the fires are a little bit more contained. We're at that point to fully contain them. It's not as intense right now, so we can actually bring them in now. Right.
We hear that phrase mop up with these types of firefighters. And so, Murray, what do you make of the fact that it took this long for the province to ask for help?
Well, let's talk about the politics because we are a political panel. And this is natural disaster, and natural disasters are not government-made or politically made, generally speaking, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't a political opportunity for politicians to advance political concerns. And I think we're seeing a lot of that going on right now, probably on both sides. But I'll speak from the NDP side first. I think Jordan McPhail makes some very valid points about how it's taken basically 2 months to deal with some of these issues, and the lack of preparedness for with the problems with the planes and everything else is something for which the government still hasn't taken proper accountability in my mind and in the mind of a lot of other people. That said, if you look at what's happening in Manitoba, if you look at what's happening in northern BC and Alberta, if you look what has happened in the last few summers with similar communities that were Kamloops, Lytton, Fort McMurray, that have all been in the last decade or longer been threatened by serious Kelowna, that have all been threatened by serious forest fires in the last year. This isn't necessarily a Saskatchewan problem alone. And I think politically people still see it that way. So the opportunity for the NDP to score many political points and to be quite crass, 2 northern ridings that they already hold, you wonder why. Well, there's probably a reason why. And that's because along the forest fringe, this is the topic of conversation. As I underlined before, I think Mr. McPhail makes a very good, solid point about some of the issues and how long it took. This is the chatter in Prince Albert, which, by the way, the NDP are holding a lot of press conferences along with Moose Jaw and a few other places where they have to make political gain. If they're going to make gains in rural Saskatchewan, it'll be along that forest fringe right now. So there are the political issues that are intersecting with a natural disaster problem that maybe wasn't handled perfectly by a government, but that said, is still a natural disaster. These things are coming together as they always tend to do in politics to make for this political discourse that we're seeing, and now we're seeing it being played out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then not to mention, too, issues in the Flin Flon Creighton area, and you see two provinces dealing with it differently,
it differently. So there obviously is that interesting contrast in terms of, well, how is Manitoba handling it? And let's focus on what Manitoba was doing that's better. By the way, there's lots of criticism in Manitoba over Wab Kinew's handling of this. So this is a problem for all premiers in terms of when they encounter a natural disaster, because there's always the political overlay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for looking into it with us, guys. This is Murray Mandryk, a political columnist, and Jeremy Symes covers the legislature in Saskatchewan for the Canadian Press. They joined us for our political panel.